Natasha,
Debbie,
show.
the show.
Welcome to it. Just two patriotic girls.
Learning about the world.
So please, don't take us the wrong way. Hey, you know what?
What?
I think if we were either country, I'd be Australia and you'd be New Zealand.
Why?
I'm bigger.
Okay. I don't know what to say.
I'm taller.
Without being offensive.
I'm taller. Not fatter.
You are taller.
I'm taller.
Yes.
I'm bigger.
You are bigger, which means more
Mass? Don't
area.
say it. No. Moving on. Bad intro. Hi, welcome to the Natasha and Debbie show, where we say stupid stuff sometimes.
Sometimes we do, and hopefully you're entertained by that.
If you're not, then we're gonna check out this video in a moment. If you check out the like button, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely. And consider subscribing. Check out some of our other content. Make sure you want to be a part of our family.
So today's episode. Now, we did an episode not long ago, actually just a few weeks. Norway and Sweden compared. And that was a really, really cool video. So just last week, we checked out Geography Now,
Yes.
New Zealand. And it was a really good video. We learned a lot of good stuff there. It was a faster one. So we had done the same with Norway and Sweden.
We did.
Geography Now. And then, like I said, the compared video. And we learned even more from that video comparing Norway and Sweden. So today, we're going to compare, well, you're not, but the video is.
Australia compared to New Zealand.
Yeah.
So hopefully we'll get a lot more information.
Yeah.
And it's always good, I think. What I like about them is seeing the similarities and the differences.
Yes.
So not just pointing out,
Yes.
the differences, but also what everybody's kind of alike.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of thinking that, and just from some Aussies we've talked to and a couple Kiwis we've talked to, that New Zealand and Australia are kind of like us over here in the US and Canada. Tell me if I'm right about that, or maybe we'll find that out in the video. I don't know, but it feels like that. I mean,
Yeah, it does.
we're a little bit closer, obviously. Okay, we're a lot closer to Canada, but I wonder if that's not like a similar relationship. So I'm thinking that I'm probably right, but I don't know. But yeah, I think this will be interesting. And I know we've heard all the time, like New Zealand gets compared to Australia a lot, and don't compare the two places, or people, right?
Exactly.
And we're not trying to do that. We're just trying to learn the differences. And like Debbie said, seeing what is similar too.
Yeah.
This is
Australia and New Zealand compared.
Australia and New Zealand, two countries in Oceania, more specifically Australasia.
We learned.
Separated by the Tasman Sea, they're two well-developed countries that often rank really high on nearly every quality of life ranking list. And yeah, they're just pretty awesome. Both seem to be kind of far away from the entire rest of the world. And because of that, also since they're so both unique, kind of in their own little world, let's first look at some differences between the two. First of all, New Zealand doesn't exist.
No.
Okay, that's just basically a meme at this point. This started since so many world maps were leaving out New Zealand. In fact, there's even a large subreddit dedicated to them. But don't believe the hype. New Zealand, in fact, does exist.
We know.
See? There it is. Australia exists too, but it's about 29
That
times
much bigger?
than New Zealand.
That's a lot.
It's the 6th largest country in the world, baby. That said, it only has around 5 times as many people.
Yeah, that's...
Why? Well, check this map out. Only 2% of the population of Australia lives in the yellow area.
I didn't know it was only 2%. Did you know
No,
that?
I didn't know it was that small amount. That's kind of insane.
I knew it was small. I thought it'd be like at least 15, 20% maybe.
Yeah, because I mean, that's such a large area. You think it could spread out.
2?
2% is...
Holy crap.
Wow.
Is there anybody watching that lives in that area? Please let us know. That's fascinating. 2%.
Area. And why does only 2% of the population of Australia live in that yellow area? That's because much of it is desert or near desert. 35% of the Australian continent doesn't get enough rain. But what about up here? Well, few live here mostly because it's so isolated from the rest of the population of Australia. Only one metropolitan area in New Zealand has a population over 1 million people. That'd be the magnificent Auckland.
Ah.
Australia, meanwhile, has 5 metro areas with over 1 million people. Its 2 biggest cities, Sydney and Melbourne, each have more people than the entire country of New Zealand. Being so much bigger, Australia has a wider range of different types of climates. New Zealand has mostly an oceanic climate, whereas Australia, yeah, just look at this map here. As I said earlier, much of it is desert or semi-arid. I should probably now bring up the sparsely populated area famously known as the Outback. While the Outback is typically only associated with the dry parts of Australia, it also includes the northern areas of the country that have a savanna climate. Basically, the huge area in Australia where humans don't dare live. It's a magical place. And believe it or not, Australia has a little bit of rainforest and parts of a monsoon climate up here along the eastern coast, southeastern coast, and island state of Tasmania, where most of the population lives, by the way. Australia has a mostly oceanic and humid subtropical climate.
If you didn't see our video on Tasmania, one of my favorite videos we've ever done. Go back and watch that, please. It was so well done. Not by us per se, but by the people who filmed the original video. We did a pretty good job too.
It was absolutely beautiful.
I fell in love with Tasmania. We should look at that more. But that was stunning. Check that one out. Just saying. Beautiful.
But don't forget the lovely Mediterranean climate along parts of the southern and south.
Sorry, just one other thought real quick with Tasmania. It's kind of like New Zealand. It gets left off maps too. We've noticed that as well.
Yep.
Western coast, that's also where a lot of Australians live. Australia also has a more varied landscape, and this magnificent sandstone formation, Uluru, one of the most important indigenous sites in the country. New Zealand's mountains are way more impressive and tower over Australia's mountains. In fact, many people not from Australia forget that Australia actually has mountains. Meanwhile, everyone seems to know about New Zealand's dramatic mountains, mainly due to the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. The producer of those films, Peter Jackson, is from New Zealand, and he almost single-handedly put New Zealand on the map due to those films. Remember how I said it's often not on maps? Sorry for the bad joke there. Anyway, you can visit the actual Shire from the film today. And fun fact, my uncles lived in New Zealand while they worked on the Lord of the Rings films. What was I talking about again? Oh yes, mountains! New Zealand's highest peak is around 1,500 meters taller than Australia's highest peak. Well, mainland Australia at least. No one seems to care about you, Mawson Peak. Way over on Australia's Heard Island. New Zealand sits on the infamous Ring of Fire, an area where lots of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions tend to occur. Australia doesn't have to worry about volcanoes. Also, since Australia sits on top of a very stable tectonic plate with no active faults, residents there don't have to worry much about large earthquakes. New Zealanders, on the other hand, have to worry about a major earthquake at least once every 10 years. Related to this, both Australia and New Zealand occasionally have to worry about tsunamis. Australia gets hit more by cyclones, while both countries have to worry about floods and wildfires. Australia is more often in the news for them.
That was the most heartbreaking thing when the wildfires happened just a few years back. I was just... The whole world, Australia, I hope you know, cared. Like, we all did over here. And oh my gosh, so many Americans, like, on social media were like, where can we donate?
Exactly.
You know, and
everybody wanted to help out as much as we could from not being there.
Yeah. It was just,
our hearts were definitely broken.
Absolutely.
Also, while bushfires are a regular thing in Australia, it had one of the worst bushfire seasons in recorded history from September 2019 to March 2020. It was catastrophic and a bit horrifying, to say the least.
It was.
New Zealand is made up of islands. Australia is mostly made up of a continent.
Well, actually, some people actually call Australia a really big island.
Well, that's preposterous. What a silly notion. Australia is clearly a continent.
I mean, I agree with you, but that doesn't stop the millions of people out there from calling it an island.
Well, someone needs to stop them. Liam, you must stop them.
I don't call it an island.
Well,
think
I don't know if
of it
that's possible, Mr. B.
Yeah, I
However,
don't either.
I can make a video looking at why some people think Australia is an island.
Right on. Can you have it done by the time I'm done with this video?
I'll see what I can do.
Dang, that's awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how that turns out. So anyway, like I said, Australia is also mainly a continent, the oldest, flattest, and driest continually inhabited continent with the worst soil for farming. And yes, New Zealand is made up of islands.
Did he say the worst soil for farming?
That's what he said.
Never learned that in any of the time that we spent learning about Australia. What?
No, I'm guessing maybe because of that middle area where only 2% live and it's deserty.
Deserty?
Deserty. New term by Debbie.
Interesting.
Worst soil for farming. And yes, New Zealand is made up of islands, around 600 of them,
Jeez.
and they're
Wow.
mostly remnants of a bigger landmass under the sea. Called Zealandia. Of those 600, however, only 13 are inhabited by humans.
Got it.
Most of the population of New Zealand lives on the Big Two, the two larger
North
main
and south.
islands, the North Island, or Te Maui, and South Island, or Te Waipounamu. Oh yeah? Well, Australia
trust his pronunciation.
actually has 8,222 islands, so it's so much more than just a
Wow.
measly continent. Many seem to forget that New Zealand is lower in latitude.
So
I mean, higher
cooler.
in latitude. Gosh, that's confusing. It's
Yeah.
higher in latitude than most of Australia. Further
Okay.
south, okay? Latitude-wise, Australia is more African than European, by the way. Australia borders the Indian Ocean. New Zealand borders the Pacific Ocean. East of New Zealand is just...
yeah.
Wow, quite a bit of ocean there. And quite a bit of ocean west of Australia, too. Australians are often called Aussies, and
Aussies.
New Zealanders are often called
Kiwis.
Kiwis.
I win.
That name comes from the kiwi, a flightless bird native to the country that's also a national symbol. Here is a kiwi holding a kiwi. New Zealand is growing at a
was a
faster
good one.
rate. Maybe why is because the cost of living is lower in New Zealand. Not only that, but residents there generally pay lower taxes than
Is that true?
residents in Australia. Australia has a
Hold on. Is that true? I've never heard that. I've never heard the cost of living is cheaper in New Zealand. I've heard it's
Yeah,
a
that's very-
lot more expensive.
Yeah, let us know in the comments because I'm
I don't
not
think
quite
that's
trusting
true.
that one.
Yeah, I'm not buying that one.
higher GDP per capita. That said, wealth inequality is a bit worse there. Also, New Zealand spends a higher percentage of its total GDP on education. Major industries in Australia include mining, energy, manufacturing, and financial services.
Okay.
Major industries in New Zealand include agriculture, forestry, tourism, and food processing. New Zealand
Really?
generally has faster internet speeds.
Odd thing
while-
to bring up.
It's so funny that they're comparing that internet speeds.
I know.
I mean, it just seems like
An odd thing to bring up.
yeah, an odd thing to compare.
You gotta have
It's just
something.
weird.
But it is interesting to know that.
Yeah, it is.
Sheep outnumber humans in Australia 3-1. Sheep outnumber humans in New Zealand 6-1.
Whoa.
Residents of Australia are generally more religious. The biggest religion there is Christianity. Within that group, most are Protestant. Almost
I'm Protestant.
half of New Zealanders have no religion.
Really?
There's no big highway that goes straight through Australia east to west. I mean,
Interesting.
there's the Outback Highway, a series of roads and dirt tracks that link the east and west,
Oh.
but I ain't trusting that, dude.
Yeah, I'm
There
good.
is a north-south highway that links Adelaide and Darwin, though. Stewart Highway, aka the track. It's just a 31-hour drive. There's a
31
weird
hours.
tradition in New Zealand of going places without shoes, apparently. You know, I think they're onto something there.
We've heard that
New
about Australia,
Zealand
though.
legalized same-sex marriage more than 4 years before Australia. Australia has possibly the world's longest fence, meant to prevent the dingoes from killing sheep in the southeastern part of the country. In fact, it's even called the dingo fence. Due to its long
Interesting.
geographic isolation, most of Australia's mammals, amphibians, and reptiles are uniquely native to it.
Yeah.
New Zealand has hardly any dangerous animals, or animals period, really. Australia, on the other hand, has the most animals with the most deadly venom. Sure, it's known for its cuddly koalas, wombats, and kangaroos, but many of its native animals will actively try to kill you, from sharks to jellyfish to snakes.
Oh, you knew it was coming.
Animals are deadly.
That said, this may all be overhyped. In fact, due to anti-venom inventions, these two horrifying spiders native to Australia haven't killed anyone there since 1979.
Okay, so he said it may be overhyped, and we did a whole video on dangerous animals in Australia, and everyone said, yeah, pretty much isn't a big deal, and I freak out over snakes. I lost it in that damn video.
You did lose it in that video.
That was so uncomfortable for me because I have a snake phobia, but I've seen more snakes last year in 2023 than everybody in the comments in Australia said they saw.
I know. Most people had commented that they hadn't seen those snakes, those spiders, anything like that, and it's really not a problem.
Find out New Zealand doesn't have anything dangerous.
I know.
Really?
I kind of doubt that.
I don't know.
There's
gotta be something
there.
Well, they had sharks off the coast. We found that out.
Australia has one of the highest electoral turnout rates in the world. Why?
You
well,
have to vote.
probably
Well, not
because
have to.
it's mandatory for citizens there to vote. Not in New Zealand, though. While medical marijuana is legal in both countries, parts of Australia have either decriminalized or straight up legalized it. Hey, speaking of, parts, New Zealand is divided into 16 regions. Australia has 6 states, 3 internal territories, and 7 external territories. So what's the difference between states and territories there? Well, states have more freedom to do their own thing. Territories are more under the direct control of the federal government. Hey, speaking of government, while both have a parliamentary system, representative democracies, and constitutional monarchies, Australia is a federation. And speaking of that, New Zealand once had the opportunity to become part of that federation. Yep, it could have been part of Australia, but turned it down. Oh, hey, let's look at some history now, shall we? Humans have lived in Australia up to 64,000 years before they lived in New Zealand. 64,000 years. Aboriginal Australians, or a name given to the various groups of people who all first settled Australia, likely arrived by sea from Asia and developed a hunter-gatherer lifestyle. Over a period of time of tens of thousands of years, the climate of Australia drastically changed. The earliest humans reached modern-day Tasmania around 30,000 years ago. Back then, it was connected to the continent via a land bridge. The first Torres Strait Islanders arrived from what is now Papua New Guinea around 2,500 years ago. New Zealand, meanwhile, was one of the last places settled by humans on Earth.
I have to look at that for a second because that's just freaking.
I know. That's just.
Cool. It's Middle Earth. Middle Earth right there. That is beautiful. That doesn't look real.
No. Looks like some AI designed.
Yeah.
Or somebody's fantasy that they put
a
together
dream
into a
that they
movie.
put out into reality.
Earth. It wasn't until 1,000 years ago, or maybe as recent as 750 years ago, that the Maori first arrived on canoes. The Dutch were the first Europeans to come across both places. In 1606, the Dutch explorer Willem Janszoon first landed in Australia. 36 years later, the Dutch explorer Abel Tasman spotted New Zealand, but never settled there. The same year that Janszoon had landed in Australia, the Spanish explorer Luis Vaz de Torres checked out the Torres Strait and its associated islands, which is why they're all named after him. However, it was the Dutch who came back in greater numbers to check out Australia, which they called New Holland, of course. Not many stuck around to live, though. Around 720-ish, some Makassar people from modern-day Indonesia came down to settle Australia. And then there was that James Cook dude, an extremely influential British explorer and cartographer. He first checked out, mapped out, and claimed New Zealand for Britain in 1769, and then checked out, mapped out, and claimed the eastern coast of Australia for Britain the next year. The French came to both places soon after that, looking at possible colonization, but they became a bit preoccupied and never followed through. The British, however, did. In 1788, they arrived to to settle, establishing the colony of New South Wales, specifically at Sydney Cove on January 26th, which today is Australia's National Day, Australia Day. Many of the first settlers of Sydney were British convicts, criminals, mostly for petty crimes, but you know, over the next 100 years, the British would establish several other colonies.
Sorry, the way they bring that up, I always think if I was like, hey, you're going to be sent to Australia, you're going to go to jail in Australia. Okay.
Yeah.
Take me on over.
Of course, that's
On down.
That's nowadays, knowing what we know. But
Right. I mean,
back then, they'd be like, "Oh, you're sending me."
Yeah,
where?"
maybe not. Maybe not. But I'm just saying, like, take me.
Right?
Across the entire continent. Similar to when the British established colonies in North America, at first they tried to live somewhat harmoniously with the various indigenous people of Australia, who, you know, had already been there for tens of thousands of years. However, similar to North America, the indigenous population had little resistance to several introduced diseases the British brought over. Smallpox, measles, influenza, typhoid, and tuberculosis possibly shrunk the Aboriginal population up to 70%. And then, of course, future British settlers weren't as kind to the natives, and they took land that many indigenous folks claimed was supposed to be communal. This led to much conflict, especially in the early 1800s. Meanwhile, things were a bit more chill in New Zealand. The first British settlers there were mostly Christian missionaries, and they lived at Rangihaua Bay beginning in 1815. More folks from Britain founded Kirikiri in 1822 and Bluff in 1823. The Maori and British mostly got along, at least until the New Zealand Wars broke out. What a surprise! Treaties had been broken and the Maori got upset. Even though the Maori were greatly outnumbered and had inferior weapon technology, they put up a good fight for decades, but ultimately lost most of their land and livelihood.
I had never heard of that word before. I'm not surprised it happened, though.
No, not at all. I mean, it seems to be the way history had went.
Yeah.
I mean, people come in to
Colonization.
take over. Yep. I mean, it's just colonization.
You said for decades. I wonder how long that was.
Yeah.
Most of the new settlers in both places did the whole farming thing, but land in Australia wasn't as fertile as many were hoping it would be. However, mining also became a thing. Gold rushes caused the Australian population to more than double between 1851 and 1860. New Zealand also has some gold rushes in the 1860s. Meanwhile, Australia and New Zealand, being literally on the other side of the world from Britain, had been becoming more and more independent. The British Parliament did allow a form of self-government to the Australian colonies and the colony of New Zealand. By the 1880s, though, a huge nationalist movement had developed in Australia. Surprisingly, a huge feminist movement had developed in New Zealand also by that time. In 1893, New Zealand became the first country in the world to give women the right to vote. But hey, 9 years later, Australia became the second country in the world to finally let women vote.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, we knew last week we learned about New Zealand, but I didn't know Australia was the second.
No, I didn't know that either. I mean, it's pretty cutting edge there.
I don't think most people know that.
No, I don't think we ever learned that. If we did, I'd forgotten about it.
I'm sure we did when we were in school, but that was 500 years ago.
And that was the year after Australia became an independent country. Like I said earlier, Australia said New Zealand could join up, but New Zealand was like, nah, man, we're cool. Australia was like, suit yourself, and carried on. Instead, New Zealand earned Dominion status in 1907, which was similar to Australia, so it has pretty much been an independent country ever since as well. Only in the 1900s did the population of both countries really start to grow. And grow they did, although both today are still sparsely populated. All right then, for the rest of the video, let's look at the similarities between the two countries. Due to the aforementioned legacy of the British, the majority of residents of both countries speak English. Maori and New Zealand Sign Language are also official languages in New Zealand. Residents of both countries have different accents, although for outsiders that may be hard to pick up. One way to tell is how they say their vowels. Aussies tend to draw out vowels compared to Kiwis. According to the world, residents of both are generally among the happiest in the world. Probably related to this, both have very low poverty. Both have a higher percentage of residents born in another country. And if you were interested in moving to either, because you know you want to be happy too, know that both are two of the easiest countries to immigrate to in the world.
Really?
Because of this high immigration, both are ethnically diverse.
Okay.
While the majority of residents trace their background to Europe, more than 16% of Australians and 12% of New Zealanders trace their ancestry to Asia. New Zealand also still has
makes
a
sense.
large Maori population. Maori culture remains a big part of New Zealand culture today. Both have a similar median household income. The minimum age to drink alcohol in both is 18. Both have areas with weird time zones. Both have flags that are often confused since they're so similar.
Yes, they are. And I'll tell you
Yes.
what, I sweat bullets when we were doing Aussie content every Wednesday. And we, I made sure, is that the right flag? When I'm putting it on the thumbnail of our videos, I'm like, oh, I would be so scared and
Yes.
so upset if I put the wrong flag
Well, that
on.
would be horrible to put the wrong one up there. So
Mhm.
good job paying attention to
I
that.
hope this video has the correct one.
Since they both feature the British Union Jack in the top left corner and stars. An easy way to know the difference is that New Zealand stars are red with anger from constantly getting mixed up with Australia's. The ozone layer is thinner above both countries compared to most of the rest of
Heard
the
this.
world. As I said earlier, both are two of the most sparsely populated countries in the world.
Yeah.
Australia in
Wow.
particular. Sure, it may account for
That's
just
pretty
over
cool.
5% of the world's land area, but it has just 0.3%
Wow.
of the
Whoa.
global population.
That's perspective.
A big
That
reason why
is.
is urbanization. Hey, speaking of which, both are two of the most urbanized countries in the world. Odds are, if you live in either country, you live in a city. Both have
Right.
versions of universal health care.
Okay.
Related to this, both have a really high life expectancy. The median age in both is about the same regarding violent crime. Both are two of the safest countries in the world. Both have
Awesome.
historically had to deal with lots of invasive species or non-native types of organisms introduced to an area that become way overpopulated and hurt the local environment. As I said earlier, many people who live in both have recent ancestors from other parts of the world, and those ancestors brought lots of animals with them that
Sure they
had
did.
no natural predators. In other words, no one eats them. Because of this, in Australia, they've had to deal with an overpopulation of European rabbits,
Really?
deer, cane toads, and honeybees,
They never
as
told us
well
that.
as wild herds of cats, goats, and horses.
What?
And believe it or not, Australia is the only
Yeah,
country in
that
the
surprised
world
me.
with wild herds of camels. Oh, and there was that mice plague last year. Goodness gracious.
Oh my.
Why'd I pause it there?
I don't know why you
Excuse-
paused it there.
Ugh. Bah.
Oh my, that no.
Did he say the mice plague?
Yes, he did say the mice plague.
Okay, move on. Didn't happen. Never saw that.
New Zealand also has its fair share of invasive species, many of the same ones as Australia, but other standouts like rats, possums, and weasels, but it has been a bit more aggressive getting rid of them in recent years. Residents of both often call the undeveloped areas of their countries, quote, the bush.
Really? I didn't know that about
Rugby
New Zealand.
is
Yeah.
ridiculously popular in both, and of course there's all the sports rivalries between the two, the biggest probably
Blacks.
revolving around rugby and rugby league, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
also cricket and netball, all these weird sports down under.
don't know
Oh,
netball.
down under is
Yeah.
what folks call these two countries, since they're, quote,
Down
down
under?
under most other countries, meaning they're pretty far south, man. Coincidentally, the song Down Under by Men at Work is also the national anthem of Australia. Just kidding. Shout out to Australian music. No offense, New Zealand, but in my humble opinion, Australia's music is defo.
I'm an
way
NXS
better.
fan.
Don't believe me? Name one New Zealand band off the top of your head. Exactly. Nope, Lord's not a band. Also,
Lord's
there's
awesome.
this Australian band called King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard that wrote a song about me, so that's pretty rad and stuff.
About him?
And one final thing. thing. In 2006, an Australian tried to sell New Zealand on eBay. He was unsuccessful. In conclusion, while there is indeed a bit of a
That's funny.
rivalry overall today between Australia and New Zealand, I think they will always have this
I think
special
so.
bond. Due to being on the edge of the globe, far away from most of it all, they really are two special, amazing countries. Oh, before I go, I almost forgot. Liam,
Yes, Mr. Beat?
did you happen to get done with your video?
Why, yes, I did, and I'm happy to report that Australia is an island continent.
Well, it's settled then.
I thought that was really cool.
That was really fascinating. I like I said in the beginning, I love doing these videos because I like to see the differences and the similarities.
Yeah.
And I know he goes over a lot of different things, which is also fascinating.
There's stuff about Australia that we learned in here that I did already know, totally forgot about. Videos that I wanted to do on Australia that totally forgot about, wanted to do,
Exactly.
still do. And obviously, almost everything we learned about New Zealand there, I did not know about. There's still so much to learn about both countries. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I want to know, like, I think more people, if I'm not mistaken, from what we've learned just in the last couple of weeks that we've talked to, have moved from New Zealand and to Australia for, because like you said earlier, it's cheaper in Australia. Or no, cheaper in New Zealand. Is that what he said?
That's what he said.
Yeah, again, I don't think that was true. I think that was wrong. Because what the people we spoke to said it was cheaper for them to live in Australia than New Zealand. And that's
True.
mostly why they moved there. So let us know if that's true, because I'm a little confused based off his video. I trust more the people that actually live there.
Yeah.
And then just a quick thing about accents. I don't know. So please, again, this is coming from a place of new knowledge. Educate me. Do all Aussies and all Kiwis, can you all differentiate between Australian accent and New Zealand accent? Always?
True.
I'm just asking. Because I've met plenty of Canadians I would never have thought were Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
I'm only using that as a reference because closeness and things. So
Yeah.
please hit that like button and consider subscribing to the channel. Just make sure you know what you're getting into before you do that. But it is free to subscribe. We hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode. I know I sure did. It was a lot of fun looking into this, learning, and seeing similarities and differences. So thanks again so much for watching, and we will see you on the next episode. Until then, please love like jazz.
Be as strong as Tyson.
Bye.
Bye.